Now, my talk is called Dungeness and the Romney Marsh churches. It's mainly about the Romney Marsh churches, but I thought I'd better include Dungeness because it's all part of the same area of the country. Now, most people know that I go to Hythe quite a bit because I've got a flat there. And so while I've been down there over the last few years, I've been exploring the surrounding countryside, and I got very interested in the Romney Marsh area. So here we go. Now here's a map that you can probably understand, but it's a bit difficult because it's all lines, but there's the UK there and France there, and this little pointy bit here is actually Dungeness and Romney Marsh. I'm sure everybody knows that, but just in case you don't, that's where it is. And it's very close to France, as you can see. Right, now we're going back a bit here. This is an old map showing how Romney Marsh was really just a series of islands and wet bits, and the bit called Dungeness down here was actually called Denge Marsh and wasn't joined up to anything else at all. And New Romney had a harbour, and Hythe up here had a big harbour, and Rye and Winchelsea down there also had big harbours because they were in the middle of basically an area of lakes and islands, and that was what it looked like round about Roman times or just before. So there we go. This is how it began to join up a bit. Dungeness down here is now a bit more of land, and Rye there. It says the Saxon town and port of Old Romney, which is there, so there was still an inlet there. So I'll just say a bit more about it. The actual marsh stretches in the southern corner of Kent, as you know, for 25 miles along the coast from Hythe to Rye, and goes inland for 10 miles. There we are. It's bordered to the north and northwest by an irregular range of hills, which actually mark the ancient coastline. Originally, the coastline was way back there, and all this land has happened in more recent times. The rivers gradually brought down the clay from the hills. It's the Wealden clay. And the process was hastened by the eastern drift up channel when the prevailing winds and tides swept shingle round the Dungeness point. And as time went on, the shingle side piled up to form a natural protective ridge on the seaward side. Gradually the islands formed, and the earliest of which were Romney and Lydd. By the time of Edward the Confessor, an ingenious system of embanking and draining was carried out to take the surplus water to the sea, making the sandy islands greater in size. This was done by the cutting of dykes and the building of defensive walls along the seashore. The most notable of these seawalls was, and still is, at Dymchurch, which is this piece of coast up here. These days, it's a massive concrete wall stretching for several miles. And in 2011, huge, massive boulders were brought in from Norway and deposited on the seaward side. I was talking to somebody about this, and apparently the noise of dropping these boulders echoed loudly across the marsh, sounding as if bombs were going off. In the earlier centuries, it was made literally of wattle and daub, clay and reeds, and by the 18th century, the young men of Dymchurch were largely employed on a daily basis to continually repair it and keep it watertight. A special type of thorn tree, specifically for use in repairing the wall, was grown on the marsh. Note page number 2. So anyway, going back, eventually the islands formed together, and the 23 parishes of Romney Marsh, each with its own lord of the manor, were then formed. By the 13th century, there were several great storms. In fact, in 1200 and various times during the 1200s, there were so many storms, it vastly altered that entire area. And the area became an extremely fertile plain because the sea had gone out, and it was actually because the soil had not been reclaimed from the area, but the sea had receded from it. So the mix of the Wealden clay, the sand and the salt gave rise to luxuriant green grass, now famous for grazing the Romney Marsh sheep. And actually the Romney Marsh sheep, I found this out recently, were actually the sheep that were transported out to Australia. So all the sheep in Australia originated from Romney Marsh. So as time went on, the trend of the receding sea continued, meaning that several of the harbours are now inland. Hythe, Romney, Rye, Winchelsea are all now inland completely. But nevertheless, most of the marsh is still below the mean high tide level, meaning that without the defences, the land will be underwater much of the time. So here we go. This is a modern map, and I've highlighted the places we're going to go to, starting off at Dungeness and then moving around the other places. And it's quite interesting. In this book that I took the map from, it says postcodes are given, which was just as well, because finding these churches is actually quite difficult. The roads are very small and narrow. The signposts to these places are non-existent in lots of instances. And when I went out and about trying to find all these churches, I actually had quite a struggle finding them all. So, but anyway, I succeeded. I haven't found all of them. There's far too many, but these are the ones I did manage to find. So here we go. Right, so we're starting at Dungeness, which, of course, when you go to Dungeness, you cannot avoid the power station. It stands there, looming. Quite amazing, really. It's built in the 1960s, and it stands there on the ground on this very flat surface. There we go, Dungeness. Here it is again. Now, this picture, I would have taken it probably in about June or July, and the wildflowers are amazing all over the place. So if you go at the right time, it's just smothered in flowers. And there we are again. Now, can anybody spot the very tiny train in that photograph coming in from left to right? That's the Romney, Hythe and Dymchurch Railway, which is a miniature railway. I can't remember, is it 1/3, 2/3? Scale? Can't remember. Anyway, it's a running, working train, but it's on a very narrow line. It goes from, although it's called the Romney, Hythe and Dymchurch Railway, it actually starts at Hythe and ends up at Dungeness. And Romney is right in the middle of its route, so I have no idea why it's called that. But there it is going past. And that's a bit more of the terrain at Dungeness with all these wildflowers, which are fantastic. This was earlier this year, before the drought struck. And there we are. You can see the train again in that one, coming in from left to right, with all those, I'm not sure what they are, these wild wallflowers and things like that. I don't know. So the reason why I'm showing you so much of Dungeness, more flowers. That's looking out towards the sea, that one. The reason why I'm showing you so many pictures of Dungeness is because of Derek Jarman, which you have obviously heard of, I'm sure, the famous filmmaker, artist and gay rights activist. And he moved to Prospect Cottage, which there it is, at Dungeness. He died in 1994 at the age of 52. And he's buried in the churchyard at Old Romney, which is why I've started in Dungeness, because we'll see his gravestone later. He left the Prospect Cottage to his friend Keith Collins, who was a great friend of his, but he was in a partnership with somebody else, so they weren't actually in a relationship, but they were great friends. And after Keith Collins' death, the cottage which he had inherited from Derek Jarman is now safe for the nation. And you can visit it at any time, walk around the outside. It's absolutely fascinating. And at certain times of the year, there are special open days when you can actually go in and have a look. I haven't actually managed to do that yet. There's the front of it. It's all been renovated up, with carefully with the garden all planted up. That's in the garden looking out towards the sea, and that shows you how the coastline sweeps round, because those hills in the background are actually the other side of the bay, and Hythe would be right round in that far corner there. So it's a big sweep of bay that we're looking at. And that's his cottage again. I did put this one in for a competition once, and the judge did not like it. I can't remember why not, but there you go. There it is again. That's in the garden again.
They've got no taste.
No, I've got no taste. And there we are. This is one. That's just another cottage, just up from Derek Jarman's cottage. But I just thought it was quite a good one to lead into the churches because of the Remembrance Day flag, which I obviously did a very clever colour pop on. Or not, as the case may be. Right, now we're moving on to the churches. I need to tell you a bit about the churches first of all. Because Romney Marsh comes under the Diocese of Canterbury, the churches that were built in the parishes were very large compared to the size of the villages that they represent. The 15th century saw the addition of several great towers, most notably at Lydd, and this is Lydd Church, I just got it to say it there. However, the Protestant style of worship influenced the removal of stone altars, chancel screens, wall paintings and stained glass, to be replaced by communion tables, text boards, you'll see a lot of those, high pulpits and box pews, all illuminated through clear glass windows. So really quite bare, but quite bright inside. Anyway, by the 1990s, the Marsh churches were generally in a poor state, and the Romney Marsh Historic Churches Trust was formed. A trust deed was drawn up and signed by an unusual trio. The Reverend Robert Runcie, the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, John Piper, an avid painter of the Marsh, and Richard Ingrams, editor of Private Eye. There's an amusing story in that Richard Ingrams refused to go to London to sign the deed, but was happy for his signature to be forged, which it was. The Archbishop said that if Richard Ingrams had signed it, then it must be all right for him to do so. And so he did. It wasn't until 17 years later that the Archbishop was told the truth. Apparently, with articles appearing in the national press and Country Life, funds started to roll in, ensuring that this is in quotes, this remarkable group of supremely beautiful buildings set in incomparable countryside was safe for the foreseeable future. As the churches are open every day, and in some cases you have to go and get the key from nearby, but you can always go in them all the time because they're part of this little group, which I think is quite good. So anyway, now we come on to All Saints Church at Lydd, which is the largest one, and it's actually known as the Cathedral of the Marsh because of its great size. The tower is 130 foot tall and is one of the tallest in Kent, and was completed by Thomas Wolsey. In 1940, during the Second World War, the sanctuary at the end of the chancel, which is here, was destroyed by a bomb, and the roof and window were badly damaged. At the time that the bomb happened, there were two lookout people on the top of the church tower, obviously not looking out terribly well, and somebody was playing, and there was an organist playing inside. And it was amazing that when this happened and destroyed so much of the front there, that they didn't lose their lives and lived to tell the tale. So it took until 1958, after extensive fundraising, for the restoration to be complete, and the installation of a magnificent stained glass window, which you'll see in a minute, was put in, which is strange in a way because the whole style of these churches is to have completely clear windows and no stained glass. Right. So I took myself off to take pictures of the churchyard. And when I started doing these photographs, I didn't consider I was going to do it as a project. So I took a picture which features this man here. Can you just see it? So I should have taken a closer up picture of him, but at that time I just saw him wandering about. I thought, what's he doing dressed up in a dinner jacket about 11 o'clock in the morning, looking very smart. So anyway, as I approached him, he came over to me and he said, good morning, and he told me that it was his birthday. And as a result, he was dressed like that. And he was going to go and have lunch in the local cafe across the road. And he did this every year and get dressed up for his birthday. And then he said, come with me, have you seen this? Come with me. So I trotted after him and we went round the corner and he cleared all this grass away and found this which says Thomas Edgar. And he told me it says the headstone's been removed to the North Chapel, which it has. But Thomas Edgar apparently served as master on HMS Discovery during Captain James Cook's third voyage to the Pacific from 1776 to 1780. And when he ended his seagoing days, he became keeper of the Dungeness signal tower and remained in that post until he died at the age of 56. So at that point, I didn't actually go in and find the headstone because I didn't know. At that point, I was going to turn this into a little demonstration. So anyway, here's some more of the churchyard. It's very scenic, very pretty little town is Lydd. There we are, more on the outside. There's a bicycle there with some flowers in its basket. There's me doing my artistic stuff. It was about this time last year I was there, so it was sort of Octoberish. With the light shining through the leaves. That one I managed to stand so as I could take the window on the other side through the window this side, if you know what I mean. So that was that. And there it is again, showing the brickwork or whatever. And inside Lydd Church is this mosaic depicting all sorts of relevant things. And I suspect that aeroplane might be the bomber. I have no idea, but it looks like it's dropping bombs to me. And then we've got the lighthouse at Dungeness. And that strange-looking thing with the circle is the hearing, the listening ear, it's called. And there's several of them along the coast there. And before radar was invented, they built these because they actually, they're like a massive ear trumpet. And they could hear enemy planes coming across the channel. The noise would be louder with this great hearing ear thing stood there. There's several of them along the coast. They go right the way along to Folkestone. So, but of course, completely redundant once radar was invented. And so then I went in the church. Oh yes, it was a Sunday, so I tentatively went in the door. It said the church is open. And as I got through the door, of course there was a service on, wasn't there? So they said, come in, come in, come in. So I said, well, I don't really want to join the service. But anyway, I did manage to take this rather blurred grab shot down the, of what was going on. But then when the ceremony finished, I went back in and I took a slightly sharper picture with nobody in it. And that shows the stained glass window that I referred to, that they built in 1958. Now, as with Andrew, a lot of these pictures were taken on my phone because the phone just does a brilliant job when you get inside the church, and it's just, didn't need a tripod or anything. There we are, getting closer to the window. It's still quite light in there because all the other windows are still clear glass. And there we are again. So it was worth waiting till 1958 for, I think. Oh, and an even closer one. Oh, and this is quite interesting. I might need to get closer if I need to read it, because it's written in quite an amusing way. We should acknowledge this at All Saints Church is not just the fundamental role of hearing and passing the message, but in recognising the awesome heritage of our unique building. Imagine, worshipped here have seen the Romans, probably, the Jutes, remember them? The Saxons, the Vikings, seriously, they camped for a time in Appledore. The Normans, the Tudors, Cardinal Wolsey, the Stuarts, the excisemen, the March Ague, Georgie Withers, she made a film here, Luddite, an explosive, and Pluto, the secret oil pipeline after D-Day. The church was used for tax collecting, swearing oaths, holding markets, baptisms, weddings, funerals. We should recognise and applaud this magnificent gift of God. We still have community fairs, etc., etc. We welcome all people of every faith or of none. They need to see we value the building for ourselves and for the future. So I thought that was quite nice. And then so then outside the church, there's lots of things in Lydd that are nowhere near the church. So outside is the War Memorial, which is quite new, and it's got, well, I don't think the memorial's new, but it's got all this new metalwork around it, which is rather nice. There we are, with this black with the poppy and dove of peace. And then they've got various things, but I thought I would choose the Royal Navy one to concentrate on, seeing this area is very close to the sea. And I thought this was rather nice because this is to everybody who's not buried in a military churchyard because they were drowned at sea. On all the oceans, white caps flow. There are no crosses, row on row, but you who sleep beneath the sea can rest in peace. Your country's free. Right, now we have a very interesting story. That I heard I was reading in a book, and it said that Larissa I can't pronounce her name, Tudor, was the wife of Owen Frederick Morton Tudor, an officer of the 3rd Hussars. Following her death, it was rumoured that she was in truth Grand Duchess Tatiana of Russia, the second daughter of Nicholas II of Russia and Tsarina Alexandra. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when all the royal family was killed, they thought that one daughter might have escaped and not been killed. And the rumour has it that this is in fact her. She lived in Lydd and born in 1896 and died in 1926. Many believe the story to be true. In the book Romanov Conspiracies by Michael Ockleshaw, which was published in 1993, he investigates the theory that one of the Romanov daughters, Tatiana, was rescued from the family's captivity in Siberia and may later have married an English officer before dying tragically young. Now, I didn't know where this grave was. I couldn't find it anywhere. I've discovered in a book that it was somewhere near the church, but not in the church. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll Google it. Found a museum in Lydd website, and I thought, well, they should know. I'll ring them up. They must know where this grave is. So I rang the phone number on it, and this very elderly lady, who told me she was 92, answered the phone and said, I don't know why you're ringing me. I don't know why my number's still on the website. I told them that I'm not volunteering in there anymore because I'm 92. And so I said, oh, OK. So I said, well, it's just a very quick question. I don't really want to know about the museum, but I'm trying to find out where this grave is. So she said, oh, yeah. And she suddenly got really chatty and friendly. And she said, yes, you go down this road and that road, and you turn left here and turn right there. Oh, God. Anyway, she finally gave me the name of the road. So I thought, well, that's handy. But I got so friendly with her that she said the museum is barely open these days, but she gave me the phone number of somebody who, if I ring them up, will probably open up the museum just for me and let me in. So at the end of this conversation, which she got quite stroppy when she answered the phone, we ended up almost the best of friends. So on the 9th of September, which was the day after the Queen died, Mike and I set off to find this grave because I thought I should include it in this talk. So with good old sat-nav and the name of the road, we actually found it. I turned it into sepia because the coloured version really was horrid. The grass was all dried out and straw-like, and it just didn't look very nice. So I thought it would look much better like that. So there we are. There it is. So and then we thought we'd go in the church. We could hear the bells ringing because if you remember, on the 9th of September, the day after the Queen died, they rang bells in every church all over the country, and we could hear the bells ringing. So we went down to the church, and I thought I'd better find this headstone of Edgar, who I mentioned earlier. You know, the one who went with Captain Cook. So I found that. And then I noticed, oh, they'd got all this stuff for the Queen, because literally one day later, but they'd got everything out, the candles and Book of Remembrance, everything. And I noticed that the door to the tower was open. So I said to Mike, I'm going to go up there. He said, you can't. I said, well, the door's open, I'm going to go up. So I went up and I got to the belfry, where they had been ringing the bells. And there I met Gordon, the bell ringer, who was not very pleased to see me and told me I shouldn't be there. But, of course, I got chatting to him and I said that I was doing this project, and I said I had to come up here and see you. And he got very friendly, and he said, apparently you can go right the way up the tower on 2 days a year, and that should be quite good because you can see right the way across to Dungeness. And so I said, well, as I'm here and as I'm doing this project, can I take your photo? So he reluctantly stood there pulling a bell, but anyway, he didn't mind too much. And when I told him what I was doing, he actually said it sounded like a life's work. Well, it might be if I did every church. And that was up in that little bit with some hand bells. Right, moving on. Everybody probably recognises this church. It's very iconic and famous. St Thomas Becket Church in the middle of the Marsh. Now, this was a difficult one to find. I really thank God for that sat-nav on that first map. Off I went, and in the direction of Rye, and you get to this bend in the road with a sort of old Joe's Cafe on the corner, and the sat-nav said, turn right here. I thought, oh, OK, it looks like a track to me. No sign saying Fairfield, Thomas Becket Church, anything. Anyway, I went up it, and after a very short distance, there I was. Here it was. So I parked there, and I thought, oh, that looks good. So several pictures here, but it looks so nice. The sky's no good, is it? It was a January day. I really need to go back when there's a nice stormy sky, or a sunrise or a sunset, but the sky's too bland. But at least it gives you the idea of the marsh all around it. There you go. And at times in the past, people had to get to the church by boat because, you know, you see that little bridgeway there? That's only been put in recent times. So there we go. I walked around it for some time and I thought, I wonder if I can go in. So anyway, I walked a little way down the path, and then I finally got to a gate which said, yes, you can go, and you have to go and get the key from this house up the road, which meant retracing my steps, getting back to the country lane, crossing over, well, there was a little bridge to cross over the marshy bit. There we are, still looking at the church. I couldn't resist taking pictures of it on my phone and my camera, so there you go. With the cows grazing. Very, very nice. Oh, rather more of them than I realised. And then, you see that house there? That's what I had to go back to. And it said, the key is by the door. So I went in, got up to the front door, and on the front door it says, do not knock if you want the key. You have to go round to the side door. So I went round to the side door and I took a very bad picture, because at this time I still didn't know I was going to do a presentation. So there it is hanging there, church key it says, with the key. It's actually hanging in there. It's about 9 inches long. So I took the key and off I went. And when I got in the church with said key, which had got lots of notices on the door saying, come in quickly, shut the door behind you or else the sheep will come in as well. And so I thought I would take a picture of the key. I thought you wouldn't really walk off with it in a hurry by mistake, would you? Because it was so huge. Anyway, when I got in there, it was absolutely worth visiting. Absolutely iconic, lovely little church. No running water, no electricity. Just very, very basic. Box pews, they all had the box pews. The plain windows. That was just a little corner in there, little place. The light was lovely. And then, of course, all these churches have these. As I said at the beginning, they all have the same 3 things: the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments, and the Creed. And they're all sitting there, all written out, so as you don't forget what you should be doing. And there's, I can't believe that they light the church just in that one candle, but anyway, that was hanging there. There is no electricity, so they must take other things in at other times. And that's looking down the other way. I don't know why that's so wonky. I don't think it really was as wonky as that. And that's the back of the pulpit here. See? Mm-hmm. So if you're back here behind it, you see the back of the vicar. Oh, there we are. There's the pulpit again. It seems to be a bit on 2 levels. Lost the red light. There we are. That's the lower bit. That's the higher bit. So I don't know whether the most important person stands up there and the next person stands there. I don't know. So
they have services there.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Because when I put this on Facebook, the church, somebody in the church spotted it and actually contacted me via Facebook and said, "You are very welcome to come to our next service. It's something like once a month on a Sunday, about 10 o'clock or something."
It's unusual being white in there, isn't it?
Yes, very white and bright.
Looks like a kitchen.
Yeah, looks like a kitchen. I probably took, but I just couldn't believe it. And I was the only person in there. There was nobody else for miles around apart from the sheep. Me and the key from up the road. And I just took some close-ups of these because they're, I thought they were quite beautiful, really. We do have time. Yes. Yeah, and the sun, that on the wall there is the sunlight coming through, I think, this window back here. Because being January, the light's quite nice, isn't it, quite often in January? Moving on. Right, this is an interesting church. This is Church of St. Augustine at Brookland. Now, do you notice anything odd about this church? It's got the tower standing beside it, yes. The most noticeable thing about this church is the fact that the wooden belfry stands apart from the church. There are several legends as to why this is so. One says that it was twice erected above the church and twice blew down, and after showing such an affinity for the ground, it was allowed to stay there. The most amusing story is that it blew down in amazement at the marriage of a confirmed old bachelor and a local very elderly spinster. It's most likely to be because of the very unstable ground on which the church is built, which has irregularly positioned nave piers and arches, which are supported by internal flying buttresses. Oh, down to the last sheet of my notes. The rest of it is legging it. Yeah, so here we go. That's this again. It was very difficult to take a photograph. Again, I think this one's on my wide-angle mobile phone because it's all very close and it's got sort of modern houses next to it, and you didn't really sort of want that from the picture. No. I managed to walk around the side and look at it. It's got bells in it and everything. It's just not on the top of the road. Oh, yes, it probably has. And there you are, that's around the back of the church, and you can see the tower just peeking over the top there. Now, this churchyard was... What's that? This churchyard was really interesting because it had such a mix of things in it. And it had one section which I was quite saddened. It had graveyards of children, and this was the youngest, only lived for a few months. But I've never seen a churchyard before where they obviously were encouraged to do those sort of graves and leave memorabilia of the child and that there. You know, you hear so much, don't you, of people not being allowed to leave things at graves and only allowed to do this, that and the other. And this one, you know, is obviously, since 2016, is well cared for and looked after. And then, in complete contrast, it's got some war graves there. So that was a very simplistic war grave there. And that's in the church again. You can see, again, very, very similar to the other ones. The tiled floor, the box pews, this time just wood, and clear glass windows. Now, I didn't take a picture of it because I still didn't know I was going to do a project. But there was a thing that looked like a sentry box, quite boring, just a wooden box, tall thing. And apparently it was called a priest box. And before they'd invented umbrellas, when they buried somebody out in the churchyard, the priest could not get wet. So they took this big, tall sentry box type wooden box thing out there, and the priest stood in there and conducted the service round the grave while everybody else got soaked. But it was in a dark, gloomy corner and wasn't very photographic, so you haven't actually got a picture of that one. And so there we are, that's in there again, looking down. And that down the end, you see it's so white and bright, which it's very simplistic churches. And that's just the artistic bit in me taking that. And then moving on to now.
Did you take a picture of the font in that church? It was a very ancient font.
Well, obviously I didn't, did I? A bit like you, but on the radio. I missed that bit. I need to go back. You see, the thing is, I have been back to some of these churches. You know, I went back to the Liz one to look for the grave and that. But when I was first going round, I was just sort of photographing things without looking at the history. Then I bought all the books and read up the history, and I thought, oh, I should have looked for that. So this talk could be expanded. You never know. You could be bored to death. Anyway, this is St Clement's at Old Romney. Now, Old Romney was a Saxon port back in the days, if you remember the maps at the beginning, on the estuary of the River Rother. And this church is famous for its pink box pews and generally pink interior. Amazingly, I'll tell you about that. Well, I will tell you about that now because I can't remember what year, Walt Disney made a film called Dr. Sin and wanted to ask if they could use the church for filming and paint the pews pink. And the congregation said, OK, as long as you put them back to how they were. So Walt Disney said, yes, that's absolutely fine. We put it back exactly as they were. Painted it all pink, the walls pink, the whole bang lot pink. Did the film, at the end of which, all the people in the village said, we love it so much pink, can we keep it pink? So basically, that's what happened. And there it is again. I can't remember what time. I think this was June. I went back there again. And this, now you see, this was June this year, and you can see there's probably a bit of marshy water in there. On their guidebook, which I bought, that looks like a huge lake. Probably somebody took a wide-angle view of it. But obviously, when it's not like that in last summer, it's got loads and loads of, it's full of water. But it's an idyllic setting, that one. I think that one was in the nicest setting, well, apart from Fairfield, because it was just in the middle of the countryside. And, here we go. This is why I did Dungeness to start off with. This is Derek Jarman's grave, which is just a granite block standing there. It's on the top are loads of seashells and pebbles. And I thought this must be because of his cottage, Prospect Cottage at Dungeness. But apparently he's also Jewish, or was Jewish, and one of the traditions of the Jewish faith is to put pebbles and things on gravestones. So I suppose it's just a good mix of both those things. So there it is again in colour with some Romney Marsh sheep in the background. And that's looking the other way. And do you know, when I was looking at this, when I was putting this show together, I thought, that looks almost like a Victorian painting. It's timeless, isn't it? It's got nothing in it that would tell you that this was taken, in 2022. I quite like that. And there's, yes, I took a photograph of that, basically saying, the pews in our church have always been painted since the time they were installed. This was a small, relatively poor community without the rich patrons which many town churches enjoyed. Our predecessors were unable to afford figured oak or other hardwood, and they are made from the timber they could afford. This has no intrinsic beauty and it was therefore painted. In the last century they were coloured chocolate brown, then battleship grey at various times, although because of the pigments available in Georgian times they are likely to have originally been of a lighter shade. And then it goes on about the film. The present colour was chosen in the early 1960s for the filming of the Walt Disney film Dr. Sin. When it came to reinstatements of the original colours, the congregation preferred the present colour, and so it has stayed. We should not be surprised to find bright colours in our churches. In medieval times, when there were no pews and congregations who were largely illiterate stood throughout the services, the walls were painted in bright colours. It was only in later times that these colours disappeared. And so the evidence of wall painting mentioned above suggests this was a painted church. But I couldn't actually really see any wall paintings in there, but there you go. So that's from inside looking out, again looking at the sheep. And that's through the window showing already, you can see the pink walls and the beginnings of the pink box pews. And again, now you recognise these, exactly the same as the other little church. They just do love putting these up. And they're so beautiful. And I don't know who she was, but I just took a picture of her because I thought she looked quite nice. And this one says, circa 1526, for the souls of John Apps and Margaret his wife, on whose almighty Jesu having mercy, amen. So that plaque is obviously very old. And then that's the things. They're a bit. This church obviously being bigger, they were obviously spread out and more imposing. There we are, bright pink pews. Absolutely amazing. Who would believe it? Even pinker in that dark corner. And all box pews, no other pews at all. There you are. The walls, even the curtains pink, look. Absolutely incredible. And not a soul around. The door was open, in I went. Didn't have to go down the road to get the key. Which I did return the other one, mercifully. Yeah, pink again. I think it all was more or less the same colour pink, but it sort of alters as to how the light's coming through.
They've left one original there, though, didn't there? Was on the left there was one, see there, that looks as if it's the original?
Yes, it does, yes. Or is that, I don't know what that is. It looks like a lectern, maybe. Yeah, don't know. Yeah. There are even those little gates are pink. And this one amused me, because here lies the body of Reverend John de Frey, who was a faithful and diligent rector of this parish for nearly 48 years. After much delight in doing good, he departed this life. I just like the bit, after much delight in doing good. Oh, just as well he did, really. So that just moved me. And there we are. Then I went up these rickety stairs. It doesn't really show, but I actually went up some stairs and took that picture looking down to get a slightly different view.
No lights there, Carol? Any electricity?
I assume there is there. I think the only one that didn't have electricity was the Fairfield one. There we are. This may be the last one. You'll all be pleased to hear. St Mary in the Marsh, which is. I had to look, that amused me. This again was in the winter. I like that road called Pickney Bush Lane. I thought that was a very nice lane to have going round the church. And yes, this was in the winter again, not last winter before, I think. It was the very first church I went to. This did have signs. Actually, as you go down the Dymchurch Road, there are quite a few signs saying St Mary in the Marsh. So that was the first one I went to, because I thought I know how to get there. There's a sign for it. And this was obviously very marsh. You can see how the marsh being so flat, it gets waterlogged. And I did hear that this last summer, when everybody else had a hosepipe ban and water shortages, the coastline that goes past the marsh and on the marsh apparently has an endless supply of water, because they're continuously having to drain it out and they're continuously storing it. So they don't actually run out of water on that edge bit there. That's precariously close to the floody bit, isn't it? That little gravestone there. And those hills you can see in the back are the ones I referred to at the beginning, which is would have been where the old coastline was, because that's the last place that's hilly, and the rest is completely flat out to the coast from those hills. So it's 10 miles from the coast to those hills now, inland. And I think I said 25 miles down the coast. So again, there's all these these dikes and things cut out. They all take the water down to the sea, bridges and little roads. And it's quite amazing when you drive over the marsh, you expect it's as flat as a pancake, it will have nice long straight flat roads. No, absolute hairpin bends, narrow the roads, hardly any passing places, can't see anything coming the other way at breakneck speed. And I suppose the roads have to go in and out to get round all the watercourses, I suppose. Oh, and then nobody will know who this is the grave of. And I went back to actually this year, so all of a sudden these pictures changed to the summer, because this is a church I went back to again, because this is Edith Nesbit. And actually it's got the most imposing gravestone I've ever seen. It's incredible, isn't it? It's like this little wooden thing. And then I tried to take a close-up of it, and I tried in Photoshop to see what it said. You can actually see Nesbit on it a bit more clearly, and it says something about author, and her maiden name was Bland, so I think you might be able to see Bland there. You wouldn't believe how hard I worked on that to try and bring something out of it, but it was under a tree in a dark corner. Won't win any prizes, that one, but I thought it was worth putting in just because, of the history of it.
It's wood.
It's wood, yes, just a little wooden thing. It's absolutely.
That's very long, would it? Not like the.
Well, it's obviously been there for some time, but yeah.
Get Tim there with his paintbrush.
Yes, yeah, Tim, go and renovate it. And that's in the side, just like the light from the window. And this was on the wall as you went in the door. I'm not even quite sure what it is. It's pretty magnificent, isn't it? Is it a cupboard? I don't know what it is. I had to work a bit on that because the light, it was quite dark in there, and the light from the door was shining on it. And so I did actually have to try to bring some of the detail out. But that's that one. And this is, I've got a note about that. Oh, nothing very exciting. Stained glass of St Michael and the Dragon was stolen in 1994. There was actually a whole stained glass window there. So this one was made by a stained glass artist from a photograph of the original, and has been built into this window to afford greater security. Oh no, this is what I used at the beginning, and this is the mosaic in that church. Apparently, all the churches, or most of the churches, have mosaics, and I've only found 2, so I need to go back again, don't I? But this was the one in that church, and I'm trying to work out what it all is. Now, I think that's probably a British plane, and that might be a Victoria Cross or something. Don't know. Now, this down here, why my red dot won't work? It probably will, I'm not in the right. This down here, you see, is famous gravestone. And this here is the back of Derek Jarman's gravestone, which did indeed have that fern on it, but I didn't take it from that side, sadly. And all these books... What, with what, where? I don't know. Do you know, I looked up a lot about Derek Jarman. It never said a New Zealand connection, but who knows? I'm not quite sure. That might be something to do with Dungeness. I've no idea what that is in the sky. Although that was in the sky on the previous one.
Another one of those listening things.
One of those listening things.
Yeah, I don't know. No, but the other mosaic had that and a listening ear. There's a little train. Look, isn't that cute? It looks like Ivor the Engine. And these books, or these plays, are all written by Noel Coward, because although he discovered this neck of the woods quite late in his life and fell in love with the area and actually rented a cottage in St Mary in the Marsh and became friends with Edith Nesbit. When he died, a copy of The Enchanted Castle by Edith Nesbit was actually on his bedside table. Well, that's what I think it is, yes, I don't know. There was nothing explaining it handily. It was just there. But there you go. And so, that's inside it again. Again, similar. In fact, if I didn't have labels on these churches, they all look much of a muchness, don't they, with the box pews. And then, we're near the end now. This is outside in June, so obviously complete contrast to the flooded one in January. All the gravestones seem to be very higgledy-piggledy. I don't know whether it's because it's so exposed and the wind howls across, or whether they're suffering from subsidence or what they are. But anyway, that's it, that. And then it was June this year, earlier this year. And of course all these oxeye daisies were out there and the grass was long. It hadn't yet turned to straw. And there's a gravestone in it. And And that's the final image, which is a gravestone sort of disappearing under all the daisies. So I don't know how I did for time. Well, that wasn't too bad, was it, Jane?
I think you've done very well. It was brilliant.